Alright guys, we're going to show you how to catch bigger and more muskies on suckers. But the first part of sucker fishing is you have to get a sucker. I'm going to tell you, there's an easy and a hard way. I prefer to come to the Musky Shop. They got the biggest, the best, and the most lively suckers in the Northwoods.
Hello.
Morning. Hey, I'm looking for some musky suckers.
We got them. Follow me, buddy. Right this way.
Find it, guys. Find it.
Everybody wants to catch a big muskie on a sucker, and we're going to show you how. But one thing that's rarely talked about is transporting suckers, how you get them to the water, because a lot of times here at the Musky Shop we have really clean well water that's pumped in here. It's very low temperatures, so these suckers are very lively when they come out of these tanks, so you're going to need to procure something to transport these guys to keep them as healthy as possible until you're on the water. There's an option from Frabill Coolers and Engel. Both have a built-in aeration system that's going to keep those fish aerated while you're traveling and on the water. So if you need to move spots, put them back in the aerator. It's very important to keep these things highly oxygenated while transporting and fishing. Now the cooler basis of these is important so we're not losing, or excuse me, the coldness. We're not gaining ambient air temperatures out the course of the day, because a lot of this stuff, especially in the fall here, is very cold water. It's dead of summer right now and probably in the high 50s. You want to keep these suckers as cold as possible. That's how they're going to be the most lively when you're putting them in front of big muskies. So make sure we have aeration system, either Engel or Frabill. We got them here at the Musky Shop. We're going to get it on the water, show you how to rig these things and how to put a big muskie in your net. It's summertime, as you can see, but sucker time is just around the corner, so we brought this guy to show you how to rig suckers and how to fish. I want to talk about where we want to place our suckers, how to place them, but first we got to rig these guys up. One thing you're going to notice is these guys are pretty lively, especially you get your suckers from the Musky Shop. You want to grab that sucker pretty tightly, especially once you start getting hooks in him, because they will thrash and bash around, so you want to be careful for that. Good firm grip. I like to grab them somewhere in this neighborhood. You don't want to give him the death squeeze, but you want to get a good hold on that guy because it can get a little bit tricky and slippery with these fish. There's a variety of sucker rigs on the market. Personally, I like the Smitty rigs, I like the Booker rigs. They're more my style, but any rig's going to be good. What you need to look out for, what becomes important in this scenario, is how big is your sucker. Don't get a small sucker rig and try to fish XL suckers. You know, they make smaller hooks, bigger hooks for different variety of sizes. I grabbed today, this is the large 2-hook from Smitty. So we're going to show you how to rig this guy. Don't set a live sucker on your lap, it won't go well. Anyway, get it out here. Jake Smith has put a zip tie on this for us. Get this guy unfurled. One thing I like about the Smitty rig, it has this rubber deal, Jay, you can see that there, on the nose hook, right? What I like doing with that guy, or what the intent of that guy is to pull him off. All right, we're going to get that guy off of here. And this is going to retain this in the mouth of the sucker, or the nose, if you will. So if this was a real sucker, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up under here and get him to open his little snoot there and come up through that bad boy. Bam, right? I'm going to place this rubber disc back on. So, pretty low chance of him getting off this rig, right? With the Smitty rig, these treble hooks have small, little, almost panfish style hooks in them. We're going to bring them back. I'm going to stick one usually about here. I'm going to come over to the other side of the sucker and get one on the other side of this guy, right? You're going to have to take this hook and pick away some scales on these fish. Just dig them in there. And I'm not trying to poke that hook in and out. I just want to bury it in the fish. That's a pretty simple rig here. And that sucker's going to be hooked with a treble hook on either side of this guy, okay? That's the way I like to rig mine in general. You have some other options. I'll pull this guy out of here. We're just torturing this rubber bait today. You've got nose rigs, and nose rigs are a little bit different. They have this clip, and I'll show you here just in a second once I free this guy. On a nose rig, it's got this little springy device, right? Get this all opened up here. Some wire there. And we'll get that guy unfurled here in a second. Anyway, on a nose rig, what we're going to do with this is we're going to open this up and we're actually going to put it into the nostrils of the fish. And so it's a little bit different of an animal, if you will. We'll come in, you'll see pretty dominant nose holes on a sucker. Come in on one guy, come in on the other, right? He is pretty much stuck. There's no coming off there. You know, when you have it in a live sucker, he's not going anywhere. Just be conscientious that we're lining that guy up to hit both nose holes on that sucker on either side. With this rig, and I'm unfurling it here straight out of the pack, they've bent the treble here. So the same thing, we had scratched some scale, come over here. One thing to note with this kind of rig is have those points pointed forward. We're usually going to have the fish coming that way. Pull the scales off, get that guy in there, pull this other guy back here, repeat the process. And again, with a live sucker, they're going to be pretty moving here, so be careful. Get that guy in. Now we have a nose rig sucker. You know, this one actually should be further back nonetheless. However you choose to rig that sucker, whether it be a nose clip or a nose hook, just try to make sure that we've got one hook on the front and one hook on the back in case a fish comes in and tail grabs the sucker. So I like to have, like I said, one on the left, one on the right. I like a little play in my sucker rig because I don't want it to be like stringently tight on the fish. I've seen sucker rigs where guys use rigs that are too small on a big sucker and he's almost tied up. He's sort of bound, if you will. Have a little play in that guy. The only difference, Booker offers the nose rig with this standard hook there. If you get one of these rigs, you can always grab a little plastic disc like the Smitty rig. I'll tell you a little ninja trick if you don't have one laying around, is the cap off of a water bottle. You can cut a little square of that plastic and that works great for that nose hook as a retainer. You usually always have a water bottle handy, and I've done that many a times on the water when I didn't have a little rubber disc to be able to rig that up. So we're gonna move into how to set these. So just because you have a sucker doesn't mean you're gonna catch a muskie. I hate to say that. And a lot of times you'll see guys, we come out and we spend, you know, $15, $20 sometimes for these XL suckers, and you go, you know, it's no guarantee. You want to make sure that your sucker selection is appropriate for the water you're fishing. That's first and foremost. Don't come in and buy a 12-incher if you're fishing action water. Sort of gauge it appropriately, because at times muskies will not eat something that's too big. So don't fish action water with big hunks of meat in some capacity. So we'll get this Booker rig out here, and you'll see this guy. They've got the swivel forward. Now with the Booker rigs, this hook is going to go sort of forward on this fish. Mouth open, we're gripping him really firm here. Boom, we're in there, right? Come in here. Now Booker does it similar to the way I like to fish them. Pick the scales, just jam the treble in there. I'll usually feed this kind through. I want to get a good hunk of meat on there. Bam, 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 right? Fit it in. But what I'm getting at when we're talking about sucker selection, make sure you have the right rig and the right size sucker for the waters you're fishing. I think what happens a lot of times is guys will buy a sucker and they think, well, I bought a sucker they're supposed to eat. Like I said, it's no guarantee. What we want to do is we want to put ourselves in the best position to catch a muskie while sucker fishing, which takes a little bit of tactics and a little bit of strategy. So I'm going to get into that as far as sucker placement, what areas we're fishing with seasonality here in a second. We've got our sucker here. He is rowdy as can be, and we got to set him, we got to place him. So outside of tactics, we need to make sure that we're set up with the appropriate equipment. I like to run my Folby rod holders. These are the same rod holders that I troll with, but I use the extension arm. So I'll put this bad boy here, right? Lock him in place, even this guy out. I like to have him straight up and down if I can get him. And I like to use this extension arm so I don't have to bend over as far. It's going to be cold. It's cold water. I don't want to have to do some bend over ordeal to get this out of the rod holder. So get this guy up, right? Now, it's just the way that I do things. When I'm fishing suckers, I always use a line counter. Just like trolling, I want to have, you know, replicatable results. I want to be able to catch muskies numerous times. I think something that's lost with the suckers about the thought process being I have a sucker, therefore I'll catch a muskie, is we need to set them appropriate to the appropriate depth to really beat light penetration. You know, just because it's a hot summer day, we have high bright skies in the fall and even later in the year. So setting your sucker deep enough that muskies are going to be able to see it, and they're going to be able to stay with that fish, and they're going to come up deep. So I like to make sure my line counter's calibrated. One thing that I do slightly different, if you notice these sucker rigs, they got a little lead to them. I'll just hook them up straight up to a fluorocarbon leader, okay? And you go, why are you doing that? That's not how it's done. The reason I like to do this is I now have this snap section here, right? I got an extra swivel, whatever. Gives me a little extra leader, obviously, if a big fish were to come in and just envelop this sucker. But this clip really creates some versatility for me. I'm able to clip weights onto this bad boy and change things up. Let's say I got a sucker, he just wants to keep bringing himself to the surface, and he's running amok. Clip an ounce, clip 2 ounces, put bell sinkers on this guy so you can appropriately set that sucker, because I've seen multiple times where muskies will come in on a sucker on pan optics, he'll come up high and they won't follow him up. It might be a light penetration thing, it might be a condition thing, but having that extra little snap and that swivel, I feel a little bit better about my chances of not getting bitten off, and I have the versatility to add egg sinkers, snap-on sinkers, whatever you want to put right here to weight this sucker where you need to get him to set. So it should be said, you know, we're going to be casting. Most of the time we should be casting to entice muskies into our sucker. So what I want to do is let's just get this guy set in here. Now, this guy's set in there just for the time being. I'm going to grab a rod here real quick. And just for argument's sake, a bulldog, right? Good combo sucker fishing. Bulldogs, Meduthas, toothy tufts, they run a little bit deeper and you can bring them in. But if you notice, I have this guy set up high here. Where I'm usually casting from is about right here. So it'll allow me to work this, and if you look, I'm going to pace myself from the trolling motor where I'm at. I'm leading right to this sucker every cast. Now if you have a co-angler, either he has his own sucker or whatever the regs are, you can both bring into the same sucker or you can cast into it, but I want to be set up position wise where this is right here. Now a lot can be said and a lot can be argued about hook sets, but you notice I said with the phobia, I have this phobia up high, so let's say this thing goes screaming. I'm right here. I'm not doing this, right? And I say that because I've seen it in cold water. I've seen a couple guys go out of the boat, they run over for a sucker fish, get that thing high as you can for the hook set. And that's a conversation. A lot of people have these thought processes of letting them turn. You know, back in the day, the old guides up here would say, smoke 2 cigarettes, and that's when you set the hook on a sucker fish, right? Take as much time as you can. Modern, you know, line, super braids, modern sucker rigs, we don't need to really wait that long, right? So let's say for theoretically, I'm right here and this guy gets cranked off. I got my line counter, right? And I got my clicker first and foremost, right? So clicker's on. We hear that thing go. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna zip my casting rod in, right? Come over here and I'm waiting for that thing to have a bend in it, okay? So if this rod has a bend in it, by the time I get here, I'm going straight here and I'm just going straight up, right? Just jack that fish as hard as you can. One thing I like about the phobia here, and Jay will interject here in a second, a real hook set on a sucker. But with the phobies, when I pull straight up out of this guy, I'm there, right? So what I like to do is if he's got a bend here, I'm just gonna basically set out of the phobia if I can. Boom, up and under. Some people want to figure out which way the fish is going, right? At times that can play. Personally, I have a quick strike rig because I want to strike him quick, okay? So regardless of which way that fish is going, if I don't have a really good bend in it, but I know he's taking it, the clicker's going a little bit and he's not really hogged it, I'll get that thing in my hand, right? And when we talk about hard hook sets, it takes a very hard hook set. I'll usually double up on this guy, and once he starts going, I'm going to really just lift up as hard as I can, right? Put as much force as you can. You hear about the hook sets with big rubber baits. You know, we're trying to break this live sucker free out of his mouth to the best of our ability. So you got to hit him hard, hit him fast. Most of the time you're fighting that fish vertical. So put your knees into it, your body weight, and hold on. And this is just a personal preference. when I'm sucker fishing, I don't want my drag cranked all the way down. Obviously, we want to let them take a little bit of line, right? If they make a run with the sucker. But when I go to set the hook, I like these big line counters so I can get a thumb in there, right? I have my thumb on that line. You know, if I've got time to play him or he's running with it, I might crank that drag. But just make a habit when you go to set the hook on a sucker, put your thumb on the spool as hard as you can, pull up, and he's gonna go crazy. And that's a way to put a big muskie in your net. So we've covered some of the basics and some little more advanced stuff of sucker fishing here. Poor Susie's suckers had a bad day, a lot of hooks in her, but no teeth marks. But you're gonna put some bigger muskies in your net and put some teeth marks in some real suckers if you're strategic about where you're fishing when it comes fall sucker time. The important thing to look for is points, break-offs, access to deeper water. A lot of times when we get in these transitional periods and things start cooling off, you got to get out of the shallows. You need to become a little bit more comfortable with structure fishing and adhering to edges. So rely on your electronics. Like I said, look for points, look for humps, look for steeper drop-offs where you're going to be able to target big fish with a sucker on your down rod and bring them in casting. The Musky Shop has the best suckers in the North Woods, and they're going to put big muskies in your net this fall.